Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It was just too long. I usually say it's enough to say that he was born and he still is alive. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, it's a great honor for me to be invited here to this meeting and to have the possibility to talk a little about German experience in. I'm afraid that I have to pour a little water, a little water into the sweet wine of green hopes, because we had a lot of experience. So, as a thermodynamic people, I usually say energy is not renewable, energy is convertible. And the so-called renewable energy originates from the sun and there from a nuclear process, the fusion. And by radiation, the energy comes to the Earth, is via photovoltaic put into electrical energy, via photosynthesis in biomass, and via a temperature rising into the wind. And, sorry, now I pressed again the wrong one. Okay. So, about half a year before Fukushima, the German government decided to prolong the operation time of nuclear power plants in Germany. After Fukushima, they decided to go out, that all nuclear power plants have to go out of operation within 11 years, that is, until the last one will shut down in 2022. 8 of them had immediately to go out of operation. The aim was really honest. So the aim was to have a balance between sustainability, between reliability, and between economy. And let me discuss a little whether we reached this really, or we are on the way of reaching this. What changed after Fukushima? On the left-hand side, we have the power. On the right-hand side, we have energy. You know, people very frequently forget that energy is power times time. And so before, you see, we had about, in photovoltaic and in wind, there were invested at this time about, no, I have to look at this. Yes, 45 gigawatts. In nuclear power, there were invested just 20 gigawatts. The energy is completely different. So the energy says, due to the short working periods of these renewable energy sources, so I have to say at once, Germany is not a sunny country. So we had still a high amount from nuclear power. And, sorry, we had a high amount. And here it is after, sorry, that's after Fukushima. The green energy, let's say the energy from wind and from photovoltaic panels, went up to almost 64 gigawatt. And still, it was much lower together than the energy produced by the nuclear power. The reason is, in Germany, photovoltaic panels have a so-called full load period of approximately 800 to 900 hours per year. Wind mills, wind plants, have a so-called full load power period of about 1,600, 1,800 full hours per year. And this is the reason, and this will make us will follow us and make us still trouble. So the intention of the German government to enlarge the renewable power is very, very ambitious. You see, this is until 2000. My problem is that I can't see it very. But a man has glasses, you see, then I see it here. Yes, so the intention is to install about 2025, almost more than 150 gigawatt. The mean consumption at present is this one. So we really have much more installed power, not much more energy, much more installed power in the future. Here we are about in 214, 215. Now let's discuss about reliable supply. Is sun and wind energy reliable? As I told you already, Germany is not a sunny country. We have a sun, you know that the month has in total between 722 and 740 hours. And so in summer, we have a quite good irradiation. There are about 250 sunny hours. In winter, January and it's December, we have a very few sunny hours. This means that the output of photovoltaic panels is fluctuating a lot. It is similar with wind. We have, you see here, the wind velocity between 7 and 6 and 5 meters per second. We have very strong winds at the coast of Germany, and we have much lower wind going to the south. And now people should know that the electric energy output of a wind plant goes with a third power of the wind velocity. This means very simply, if the wind velocity is reduced due to that the plant stands in more than the south, is reduced down to 70%, then the power is only 0.7, 0.7, 0.7 is 35%. That's also the reason why, for example, in Bavaria, wind plants are up to 200 meters, 250 meters, but then they are not very beautiful to the country. So the best wind situation is in Scotland, north of Scotland. And how is now the energy or the power output? These are two examples. The total German power supply and power consumption in the month of November 2014, in the month of August 2014. First of all, August is a holiday period and the consumption is less than in November. What it is plotted here is the dark green is biomass, is the supply by biomass. The light blue is the supply by wind, by hydropower. The dark blue is the supply by wind. The yellow is the power supply by photovoltaic panels. The large area, gray area, is the power supply by fossil-fired power station and by nuclear-fired power station. And the red line is the consumption. And you see, in summer, there is a big contribution of photovoltaic plants to power supply. In winter, or it's not really winter here, it's November. I will show you in the next slide a comparison when we were in December. It's much less. So this means the fossil-fired and still existing nuclear power plants have always to fill the difference between renewable energy and demand of energy. And this, now here perhaps a little more drastic picture. This is December, between 1st and 10th of December 2014, and also between 1st and 10th of June 2014. If we just look to compare it, then the contribution of sun and wind and also biomass in the winter was in the order, if I remember well, of 6 gigawatt. In summer, it was in the order of 29 gigawatt. So the difference between had to be filled by fossil and nuclear power stations. This means in summer, you don't need many of them. You do not need many of them. So 32 is about a capacity of 32 fossil power stations. In summer, you don't need them. In winter, you need it. But they have always available. Even they have, most of them have to be in hot standby. This has in future the consequence that these fossil power stations do not earn enough money because they cannot produce enough energy. So E.ON, it's one of our big utilities, E.ON lost 2 billion, 10 to the 9th, 2 billion of euro during the last 1 or 2 years. In future, this would mean that we not only have to subsidize sun, wind, biomass, and so on, we also have to subsidize the fossil-fired power station because they are not anymore economic. And this is a strong burden. Now you can argue, but with wind power, offshore wind power station, it is much more stable because on sea, the wind is always blowing. It's not quite true. You see here, again, in February and January this year, up to now, in this grid, which I show you, were only installed about 600 megawatt. And you see, we have full power, we have calm, sea calm, and the same is, or similar, is in January. And you could have the same picture for summer and so on. That is, wind on the sea is more stable, but is not reliable at all. What are the consequences? The consequences are that new power lines have to be built or between north and south. First of all, our politicians say always to bring the wind power to Bavaria and to bring the sun power to Lower Saxonia. That's correct, but it's not quite correct, because one of this line should originate in the Lausitz, this is in Saxonia, and this is the center of the brown coal area. So it brings stable electricity from brown coal to the south. In addition, if there is too much wind and too much sun, we are exporting to Benelux states the electric power. And on the other side, if it's not enough sun or not enough wind, we are importing electricity from France, from Czech, and so on. And one thing which is very reasonable is, if there's too much renewable power, we export it to Austria. There it is fed to pump power stations, and these hydro pump power stations fill up an upper water level, and when there is not enough power, it's flowing down again and producing electricity. The only problem is that we sell this electric power to Austria for about 2 cents per kilowatt hour, and we buy the electric power from Austria for 5, 6, or 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And just to show you export and import, we are importing a lot from France, and all you know, this is up to 80% nuclear power. We are importing it, but we are also exporting, mainly to the Netherlands and to Austria, and this is just an exchange. And so the German island could not work alone. It needs the neighbors to support power supply or to take power from. One possibility would be, and is perhaps, storing the volatile power from sun and from wind. What storing possibilities we have. The best one we have is hydropower, hydro pumping power. Our people are strongly against this, to build new hydropower stations. There was one proposal to make a hydropower station near Tegernsee, it's the Walchensee. It was cancelled due to protesting by the people. And another possibility, I don't discuss all of them, is to compress air and then to expand the air again and wind power, electric power. If you compress air, not only the pressure is rising, but also the temperature. And this means if you then store this compressed air, it slowly is exchanging heat with the ambient, and so it's losing energy. So only if you could store the compressed air adiabatically, but that's a very high problem. Adiabatically, we would end up, sorry, I forgot, here it is efficiency, and here is the cost. What you find very frequently proposed by the German politicians is the so-called the so-called electrolysis power to process. This means if there is too much electric power, you produce H2 via electrolysis. You can this H2 change into gas, in methane, NH4, and then you store this gas. This you can do in pipelines, and then you are burning the gas again in gas turbines. The efficiency is very low, in the order of 35–40%. So it's very easy. The electrolysis has an efficiency of about 0.6. And a very good gas power station has also efficiency of 0.6, 60% perhaps to say. So 0.6 times 0.6 gives 36. And in addition, this is very, very expensive. So the costs of such electric power, repower again, would be in the order of 60–70 euro cent. Up to now, unfortunately, we do not have real powerful batteries or accumulators which could really work or withstand this effort. Storing hydrogen and liquid gas is also very complicated. So you see, this is the storing energy stored per volume of kilowatt hours per liter. Certainly with gasoline is no problem. With liquid natural gas it's already bad, and it's much worse with liquid or compressed hydrogen. So this is really a problem or a trouble too. In future, we will have, and this was already briefly mentioned, I think, by the lady before, smart grids and smart meters. Smart grids is a good thing. So you are controlling the distribution of the electric power depending on sunshine and wind and according to consumption. Smart meters is the following. This is the way to a planned economy. Because then if you use more than 6,000 kilowatt hours per year, you are forced to put a smart meter into your house. And with this smart meter, it's not only metering the consumption of electricity, it can control the consumption of the electricity. It can, for example, minute by minute, change the cost, the price of this electric energy, and it can also prevent that to switch on strong users or have to switch off them. So this is, I see this as as a problem. Now, economical supply. The cost for panel, for photovoltaic panel, certainly were decreasing between 2000 and 2012. But let me say, if you installed, or if you put in operation a solar panel in 2004, you got, that's this one, you got almost 57, 58 cents, euro cent per kilowatt hour. And this is guaranteed for 20 years. So until 2024. Later on, it's lower. So you can already now imagine what a burden this means to the German citizen. And this you see quite clearly in the next one. We do not have to support photovoltaic, I will come later on. We are supporting hydropower with an averaging, so this is the supporting is depending on the year when the plant was put in operation, is also depending on the amount of electric power it's producing. And we can just take this value, so for hydropower to have here, it's about 10 cents. For biomass, it's much more expensive. For various trash, don't forget about this. Wind onshore, that's okay, this is in the order of 8–9 cents per kilowatt hour. And wind offshore is guaranteed, the windcraft owners have a guaranteed reimbursement of 15 cents per kilowatt hour for 20 years. And with photovoltaic is even worse. You see, at the beginning we were in the order of 60 and even more. Now we are down here approximately, so between up to 15 cents per kilowatt hour. This means, sorry, just to tell you first what at present is about the distribution. We have about 26% renewable energy. We have 26% produced by coal, in this case brown coal, lignite. Hard coal is about 18% and nuclear is still 16%. And the total amount here, we see here, is 610 billion of kilowatt hours. And the contribution of renewable energy is 160 approximately. What consequences does this have to the financial burden? Here are plotted. The light green one is burden just due to the energy feeding law. That is because subsidizing wind, biomass, photovoltaic, and so on. And this was summing up in 2013 up to about 20 billion of euro. In total, we were more than 30 billion because in addition you have an energy tax, you have to pay for the diesel engines which produced in a coupled way electric energy and heat and so on. And at the top of it, it's not yet here, at the top of it there comes the value added tax of 19%. So if you multiply the figure which is not shown here, it's about not 31, it's about 35, 36 billions of Deutschmark. If you multiply them with 1.19, that's the added value tax, and you divide the total amount by the number of people, approximately 80 million, you end up for a total burden to a German citizen of more than 500 euro per year. And this really means a strong burden, especially to poor people. What is to be expected in future? Here's the upper blue line is photovoltaic. Maybe we go down here. The two red lines, the dotted one and the through one, is wind, and down here is coal and also natural gas. But you see, biomass will still stay high, and we will end up somewhere with, I don't know, 10, 15 cents per kilowatt hour, just for the renewables. And this is really stays much expensive. Certainly we have to realize that future nuclear power stations, which will not build in Germany, and future fossil power stations also are producing electric power much more expensive than it's now. So you need, there was a contract between Areva, the French producer, and the British government, and there was guaranteed about 9, 10, 11 cents per kilowatt hour. The existing nuclear power stations produce electric power for 2.5, 3 cents per kilowatt hour. The fossil-fired power stations for 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Certainly, we have also to take into account the so-called external costs. And the external costs are due to CO2 emissions and also due to harvest damages to the harvest and material damages. But you see they are much smaller, than the order of 1 cent, not percent. Because we were talking a lot about energy in buildings, benefit you have really from making buildings high efficient. With all other you pay, and so this is the red one are the costs per kilowatt hour. Now finally, sustainability. And with sustainability you primarily think about CO2 emission. Germany really reduced its CO2 emission in the 90s. And this was due to increasing efficiency in industrial processes. And the driver was not a governmental order, the driver was purely economic reasons. You know, Germany is a country of high salaries. We got more and more, at this time, still up to now, more and more problems that our products were too expensive. We could not lower the salaries. The only way we could lower was the energy costs. And now, here, in the last 3 years, from 2012 to 2014, the CO2 emission was increasing. So it is not astonishing if you shut down 8 nuclear power stations which are producing electric power at almost zero emission, and you have to replace them to a great extent by fossil power stations, the CO2 will increase again. And look, have a look, how is this worldwide? The total, it was 2012, the total CO2 emission was about 33,000 billion of tons. The strongest CO2 emittant are China and the United States. Turkey, I did not listen here, you see, but you see it here. Turkey is in the order of 300, 320 tons per year. This means if Turkey is saving 10%, if Turkey is reducing its CO2 emissions by 10%, this has a global benefit of 1 per mil. If these two countries are reducing their CO2 emission by 10%, this has a benefit, a global benefit of 8%. This does not mean, I would not like to say here, Turkey should do nothing, but each country has the right to balance, to look for the balance between cost and benefit. And if the benefit to the global atmosphere is very low, the country really has to think about how much cost it can put on his citizens. Now, another astonishing picture. Sorry, I forgot here to say that the red line is the CO2 emission per person, per head and year. And naturally, you see the United States are very, very high. Also, Canada is very high here. Turkey is again very, very down. And if you now compare the CO2 emissions per head, you would expect that the United States is at the top. No, it's Qatar and the Emirates. This is a CO2 emission per head and year, and you see the CO2 emission per person is depending on the welfare, of the prosperity of the country and the citizen, and on the climate of the country, because cooling and refrigerating is emits much more CO2, needs more energy than heating, and the Americans are quite down here. To talk about sustainability, we have also to think about the resources and the reserves. And newer prospecting activities showed that we have a large amount of brown coal worldwide. By fracking, a large amount of gas was found, and also hard coal it's not naturally, is still enough. So fossil resources will last still for many, many years. Now, what are the final aspects of this thing? We have, let's say, also for looking for sustainability. In Germany, we have 43,000 to 45,000 megawatt installed. This corresponds to a huge area and usually a place on roofs and on small acres. Now, so we have about between 10 and 50 millions square meters. And this with many, many people. In the future, in 20 years from now, the owners of these photovoltaic panels are not anymore alive. What will the heirs do? Will they plant new ones, even with an aspect that they do not get the same reimbursing as their fathers got? Or will they say, no, I prefer to put my money on the bank. In future, I have perhaps a higher interest. And so who will or can guarantee the electric power supply from photovoltaic panels? It's not in one hand, it's in the hand of millions of private people. Now what's going on? Are renewables the real future sources? Frankly speaking, I read a new paper that worldwide only 1% or a little less than 1% is installed in renewable power producing electric energy. Natural gas, I think yes, it will increase. Hydropower, it's a question of the countryside, of the topography of the country. Coal, nuclear power, I personally think it will still be mixed of them. And being not only a pessimist or optimist. We have a saying in Germany, the optimist sees the glass still half full. The pessimist sees the glass already half empty. And as a pessimist, I would say, yes, we have to continue our way, but to bring it to a success, but it's only possible as long as our people are rich and our country is rich, and we have to face a lot of competition worldwide. The pessimist in my body says the German energy turn will fail. So, just to thank you for your attention, and this is just, let me say, a hope. It's a fusion. We will bring the sun fire to the earth in 50 years, in 100 years, I don't know. You know, in Kadarash, there's under construction a fusion reactor. Germany directly is not supporting it. The costs are estimated, originally estimated 10 billions. And people say, oh, it's much too expensive, but we pay every year 20 billions for subsidizing renewable energy, and even if the cost went up to 30 billion, I think it's worthwhile to work on it. Thank you so much.
Evet, sorularınızı alalım. Buyurun Cahit Bey.
Herr Professor, wir bedanken uns für Ihre exzellente Präsentation.
Das ist Deutsch.
My question is, I have to say that I have worked with Jürgen Trittin during the CST9 preparation, so I am in a way anti-nuclear person. So, what is your opinion about the nuclear energy? You said that a mix of those, but Turkey is preparing to build one, in fact, two nuclear stations. And four, okay. And I live in a country, which is Austria, who built a nuclear station, but through public pressure,
yes,
never put it into operation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the decision, the German decision of shutting down the nuclear power stations was after Fukushima. And there the nuclear power station was hurt by a tsunami. And the main problem was that the machine building, where you have also switched gears, were open to the water for the tsunami. So immediately they had a short-circuited and no emergency system could work. The probability without a tsunami at Fukushima, there were old nuclear power stations, that there may happen a catastrophic accident was about 10 to the minus 3, 10 to the minus 4 per year of operation. The probability due to the tsunami was 10 to minus 2 for an accident. New power stations, these are the new AP1000, the new European pressurized water reactor. They have much, very more sophisticated emergency systems, and the probability for a catastrophic failure is estimated to 10 to the minus 6 to 10 to the minus 7 per year of operation per reactor. So my opinion is that many countries, especially France, United States, and even the Emirates are intending to build 4 nuclear power stations. And the Chinese have 50 power stations under construction and in operation. That worldwide the nuclear power will continue. But my main problem, or what I am afraid is, that the safety features of these nuclear power stations, especially in China, are not high enough. And that we will have the next accident, catastrophic accident, I don't know, in 20 years, in 30 years, I have no idea. And this gives again, but what we should do to put real very safe nuclear power stations, which are still economical and which have a so-called natural cooling system. So you do not need active systems in case of an accident. There will be other countries like Austria, like Italy, probably also Germany, as long as we have this Social Democrats, Christ Democrats, Green Party, which will go out of nuclear power. But nuclear power will survive. And what I personally think, gas will be the main supply to electric power.
Başka sorular? Buyurun.
Thank you, Professor. But a fundamental question, Professor, hello. No, thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Sorry, I did not see you.
It's okay. The fundamental question for us, or for many people, is following really. Does it make any sense really when you have really nuclear power plants, let's say in France, even in, I guess, even in Strasbourg area, but where you are shutting down really nuclear power plants in Germany, because just in case there's an accident in Alsace, yeah, or Strasbourg, yeah. So, but it will come all the way to Stuttgart, yeah. So does it make sense to have shutting down the nuclear power plants?
I agree with you. That's really nonsense. We have 58 nuclear power stations in France, many of them along the Rhine River at the German border. And if there is a nuclear accident, the radioactivity will be blown down to Munich. And so I cannot imagine why the Germans do not build or are not still operating a real safe nuclear power plants. There may be the last 4 or 5 ones. But just decided to shut down everything. I personally think until 22 there will be some changing in their mind. Frankly speaking, the decision in 2011 in Germany was made by the politicians because votes were coming up in Baden-Württemberg, that is Swabia. And Oettinger wanted to win the votes for the Christ Democrats. But the Greens were very strong in Baden-Württemberg, especially because they had organized a protest race against the new main station in Stuttgart. And so, in the hope to win the vote, the federal government decided to stop nuclear power. They did not win the votes. That is really a problem. We are surrounded by nuclear power stations. In Belgium, we have nuclear power stations. In Switzerland, we have nuclear power stations. In France, we have nuclear power. In Czechia, just at the border, we have nuclear power stations. So don't ask me about the logical reason.
Any more questions?
Professor, we're going to say in Turkish, whenever you feel that you are losing money, instead of continuing to lose money, it's better to stop the business. Maybe this nuclear, my wife always says that, now in Turkey you dig down in the earth and you find 2,000 year plus old niceties. You are started how the old people living in Anatolia created civilization. And 2,000 years ahead, when people dig out near Kiev and will hit the Chernobyl. And the last word probably will not be recorded because they glow and die.
Yes, if you remember how the world changed from the beginning of the 20th century, 1900, we were all going on with horse carriers. And what is today? Today we have the so-called silicon age. And so my hope is that in the far future, our followers will find a new way of energy, and perhaps we'll need less energy than we need today. But we have to work on it.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much, Professor Mayinger.